The desert wind was a lonely sound, whispering secrets through the cracked adobe walls of the ranch house. For 3 years, that sound was the only company Garrett Holiday kept. The ranch wasn't a home. It was a tomb, built for a future that had died on a dusty street in Redemption Creek. He was 30 years old, but his eyes held the haunted look of a man 100 years dead. Each morning he'd rise, work the cattle, mend the fences, and each night he'd sit with the silence, the ghost of a woman with copper hair and green eyes his only companion. Her name was Lily. Her grave was the only place he ever went besides the ranch. 3 years. 3 years since a spray of bullets from a bank robbery had torn through the town and torn through her. He'd been a deputy then. He'd carried her bleeding body to her father's office, but it was no use. The outlaws had vanished, and so had Garrett, disappearing inside himself until all that was left was a hollow shell. He inherited this ranch from Lily's father, a man who'd quickly followed his daughter into the grave, leaving Garrett with nothing but land and memories that cut like glass. This evening was like all the others. He rode back from the cemetery, the sun bleeding across the horizon, painting the unforgiving landscape in shades of orange and blood. He unsaddled his horse, Copper, the familiar motions doing nothing to quiet the ghosts in his head. He filled the water trough, the creak of the pump handle the loudest sound for miles. But then, as he turned toward the house, he saw it. A figure, sitting on his porch steps, small and still in the fading light. His hand went to the revolver on his hip, the weight of it a cold, familiar comfort. He hadn't drawn it in years, but instinct was a hard thing to kill. He walked closer, his boots kicking up soft puffs of dust. The figure wasn't a man. It was a young woman, maybe 20 years old. Her dark hair was in a long braid, her deerskin dress decorated with beads that caught the last rays of sunlight. She was Apache. She stood as he approached, not with fear, but with a quiet dignity that was almost unnerving. Her dark eyes met his, and they weren't just looking at him. They were reading him. For a long moment, the only sound was that lonely wind. Garrett broke the silence. His voice was rust, torn from a throat unused to speaking. "You lost?" The young woman shook her head. "No," she said, her English clear, accented with the melody of her own tongue. "I came here looking for you." Garrett's grip on his gun didn't loosen. An Apache woman, alone, this far onto settler land? It made no sense. "Why?" he asked, his tone flat and hard. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached into a small pouch at her waist. She pulled out something that glinted in the twilight. Something silver, hanging from a thin, tarnished chain. She held it out to him, and Garrett's world stopped turning. His breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It was a silver locket, delicate, familiar. He'd held it 1,000 times. He'd bought it for Lily on her last birthday. He had placed it around her neck himself. It had been buried with her. His hand trembled as he took a step forward. The young woman placed the locket into his palm. The metal was cool against his skin, a stark contrast to the fire roaring through his veins. With shaking fingers, he clicked it open. Inside were the 2 tiny photographs, just as he remembered. Him, smiling and young, and Lily, her green eyes seeming to hold all the light in the world. "Where?" he whispered, his voice a ragged edge of disbelief and fury. "Where did you get this?" The young woman's expression was impossibly calm. Her dark eyes held his, unwavering. "She sent me to you." The words didn't compute. They were just sounds hanging in the air, meaningless. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Who sent you?" "The woman you loved," she said, her voice soft but sure. "The one who rests beneath the wooden cross. She came to me in a vision. She told me to bring this to you. She said you were dying inside, and that you needed to live again." Garrett's mind buckled. It was madness, superstition, the ravings of a girl lost in the desert. But the locket in his hand was real. It was an impossible truth he could not deny. There was only one explanation. One horrific, unthinkable explanation. The rage came then, hot and blinding. You dug up her grave. The accusation was sharp as a blade, meant to cut. But the woman didn't flinch. She just shook her head, a slow, firm denial. I did not touch the earth where she sleeps. The locket was given to me. I do not expect you to believe me, but I speak the truth. He stared at her, searching for the lie. He was a deputy for years. He knew how to read people. He could spot deception a mile away. But in her face, he found nothing. Only a deep, unsettling sincerity. He wanted to scream at her, to chase her off his land and back into the desert she'd come from. He wanted to be alone with his ghosts again. But he couldn't. The weight of the locket in his hand held him there, a silver anchor to a mystery he couldn't ignore. "What's your name?" he asked, the anger giving way to a weary confusion. "Nan," she replied. "It means maiden in my language." "Well, Nan," he said, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to leave." She didn't move. Her posture didn't even shift. "I have nowhere to go," she said simply. "My family was killed by soldiers 3 moons ago. I have been wandering since then, following the vision that led me here. Let me stay. I will work. I can cook, mend, tend the animals. I ask only for shelter and food." He saw it then, the flicker of desperation behind the dignified calm, the slight tremble in her hands. She was as lost and alone as he was, a different kind of ghost, haunted by a different kind of past. The last thing on earth he wanted was company. Especially company that spoke of visions and carried impossible things. But he couldn't turn her away. Maybe it was a flicker of the man he used to be. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the impossible locket in his hand. He let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 3 empty years. "There's a shed behind the barn. You can sleep there tonight. We'll talk more in the morning." A flicker of relief crossed her face, so quick he almost missed it. "Thank you." He turned without another word and walked into the house, the locket clutched tight in his fist. He didn't believe in visions. He didn't believe in spirits. But he also didn't believe in magic lockets appearing out of thin air. For the first time in 3 years, the silence of the ranch wasn't just filled with grief. It was filled with a question. A single, burning question that kept him awake all night long. How? Dawn broke pale and gray, and Garrett rose before the sun. Sleep had been a stranger. He'd spent the night turning the locket over and over in his hands, his mind turning over her words. "She sent me to you." It was impossible. It was insane. And yet... He stepped out onto the porch, half expecting her to be gone, a figment of his sun-addled imagination. But she was there. A thin curl of smoke rose from a small fire near the shed. Nan was crouched beside it, stirring something in a pot. The smell of coffee and roasting meat hit him, and his stomach rumbled. It had been a long time since anyone had cooked for him. He walked over, his boots silent in the soft dirt. She looked up as he approached. "I made breakfast," she said, her voice quiet in the morning stillness. "Rabbit. I hope you do not mind I hunted on your land." He grunted and sat on a nearby log, accepting the tin cup of coffee she offered. It was black and strong. He watched her as she served the rabbit onto a tin plate. Her hands were calloused, but her movements were deft, efficient. There was a scar on her left forearm, a pale line against her sun-bronzed skin. She moved with a purpose that he had long since lost. They ate in silence. The food was good, better than anything he'd made for himself in years. When they were finished, he set down his plate. "Tell me," he said, his voice low. "Tell me everything about this vision." Nan met his gaze directly. There was no hesitation. "I was by the river, gathering water as the sun set. I felt a presence, like I was being watched. When I turned, she was there, standing on the far bank. Her hair was the color of fire," she said, her eyes distant as if seeing it again. Her eyes were like green stones from the riverbed. Garrett's throat went dry. The description was perfect. Too perfect. No one in Redemption Creek had hair like Lily's. It was the first thing everyone noticed about her. How could this stranger know that detail? Nan continued. She did not speak with her mouth, but I heard her words in my mind. She told me her name was Lily. She spoke of a man she loved, a man whose heart was broken and lost in shadow. She said I must find you. She said I must bring you the locket she wore, as a sign. A sign of what? Garrett asked, his voice rough. A sign that it was time to let her go, and to live. The air grew thick and heavy. A cold knot formed in Garrett's stomach. How did you get the locket? She held it out to me across the water, Nan said simply. When I reached for it, the vision faded. She was gone. And the locket, it was in my hand. Garrett stood up, pacing back and forth. It was a fairy tale, a ghost story. But he couldn't shake the details. The hair, the eyes, the locket itself cold and real in his pocket. There was no logical explanation. He had buried her himself. He had placed that locket around her neck before they closed the casket. No one could have known. Why you? He finally asked, turning to face her. If she wanted to send a message, why not come to me? Nan considered this for a moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. Perhaps because your grief is a high wall. Your ears are closed to whispers from that world. Or perhaps because I was the one who needed to be found too. He had no answer to that. He walked toward the corral, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. Part of him, the old deputy part, screamed that this was a trick. A long, elaborate con. But for what? The ranch? It was barely worth anything. Nan followed him, her footsteps light on the earth. If you're staying, he said gruffly, not looking at her, you'll earn your keep. The roof on the barn has a leak. Horses need tending, fences need mending. I can do these things, she said, her voice quiet but firm. And she could. Over the next few days, Nan worked from sunup to sundown. She patched the barn roof with a skill that surprised him. She had a gentle way with the horses, and even surly old Copper seemed to take a liking to her. She moved about the ranch with a quiet competence, never complaining, never asking for anything. She didn't invade his space. She respected the fortress of silence he had built around himself. But her very presence was a crack in its walls. He found himself watching her. The way she moved, the way she worked, the way she would sometimes pause and look out at the vast, empty landscape with an expression he recognized all too well. Loneliness. One evening, they sat by the fire, the flames crackling, pushing back the desert chill. It had become their routine. Supper, then the fire, then the long, quiet night. You carry great pain, she said suddenly, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. I see it in your eyes. He stared into the flames, his jaw tightening. Everyone carries pain. Yes, she agreed, but not everyone lets it become their cage. He looked at her sharply, the old anger flaring. You don't know anything about me. I know that you have stopped living, she said, her gaze steady and unafraid. You work, you eat, you sleep. But you do not live. The woman you loved, Lily, she would not want this for you. You have no right to speak for her, he snapped, his hands clenching into fists. You didn't know her. You are right, she said, and her calmness only fueled his anger. I did not know her in life, but I felt her spirit, and I know what she wanted me to tell you. She said to live. She said your time on this earth is not finished. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He stood so fast his chair scraped back, screeching in the dirt. I'm going to bed. He turned and stalked into the house, slamming the door behind him. But he couldn't escape her words. They echoed in the silent darkness of his room. Your time is not finished. For 3 years he'd believed it was. He'd believed his life ended the moment hers did. Letting her go felt like a betrayal. It felt like admitting her death was just the end. Nothing more. But as he lay there, staring at the ceiling, another thought crept in, unbidden. A terrifying thought. What if Nan was right? The next morning, an unspoken truce hung between them. He found her mending a saddle on the porch. He sat beside her, not speaking for a long time. The only sound was the scrape of the needle through leather. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For last night." She glanced at him, the barest hint of a smile on her lips. "Grief is a fire. It burns hot. You do not need to apologize for its smoke." He nodded, grateful for her simple understanding. "Tell me about your family," he asked, wanting to steer the conversation away from himself. Her hands stilled. "My father was a warrior. My mother, a healer. They taught me how to read the land, how to be strong, how to survive." Her voice became distant. "When the soldiers came, I was in the hills, gathering herbs. I heard the shots. By the time I got back, they were all gone." "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling small and useless. She looked at him, her eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness. "We all lose people. It is the way of the world. But we honor their memory by living, by carrying them with us, not by joining them in the dust before our time." He looked at this young woman, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, and he realized she understood his pain in a way no one else could. She wasn't just speaking platitudes. She was speaking from experience. As the weeks turned into a month, a quiet rhythm settled over the ranch. They worked side by side, a silent team. He fixed the fences. She tended the small garden she'd planted. He wrangled the cattle. She cared for the horses. The silence between them was no longer heavy and oppressive. It became comfortable, shared. And slowly, something inside Garrett began to thaw. One day, he found himself laughing at a joke she made. The sound was so foreign it startled them both. He started taking pride in the ranch again, seeing it not as a graveyard of his dreams, but as something he could build, something that was alive. But with this thaw came a new, terrifying feeling, a warmth that spread through his chest whenever he looked at her. It felt like a betrayal. It felt like he was forgetting Lily. He had loved her with every fiber of his being. How could he feel anything for someone else? He tried to pull back, to rebuild the walls she had so quietly dismantled. But it was too late. Nan was there, a steady, calming presence, a reminder that he was still breathing. One afternoon, a dust cloud on the horizon announced visitors, a group of riders. Garrett's hand went to his gun, old habits dying hard. As they got closer, he recognized the man in the lead, Samuel Tate, a neighboring rancher, one of the few people Garrett still considered a friend. "Garrett!" Samuel boomed, reining in his horse. "Good to see you, son. Haven't seen you in town for an age." Garrett relaxed. "Been busy, Samuel." Samuel's eyes fell on Nan, and his bushy eyebrows shot up. "Well now, and who is this?" "This is Nan," Garrett said. "She's helping out." Samuel dismounted, a friendly grin on his face. "Pleasure to meet you, miss." He turned back to Garrett, his expression growing serious. "Listen, Garrett, I came to warn you. There's a gang of toughs operating in the area. Hit the Miller place over by Flat Rock last week. Stole horses, supplies. Sheriff's got a posse, but they're ghosts." The word gang sent a jolt of ice through Garrett's veins. It brought back the smell of gunpowder and the sight of Lily's blood on the street. "I'll keep an eye out," Garrett said, his voice tight. "You do that," Samuel said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't want any more trouble visiting this valley." After Samuel left, the easy silence was gone. Garrett's mind was churning, dragging up memories he'd tried so hard to bury. The faces of the outlaws who'd killed Lily. He'd never found them, never got justice. It was a failure that had festered inside him for 3 long years. That night by the fire, Nan's voice was soft. "You are troubled." Just thinking about what Samuel said. She studied his face in the firelight. "You are thinking about the men who killed her." It wasn't a question. He looked at her, startled by her perception. "How did you know?" I see the same look in your eyes that my father had when he spoke of the soldiers, she said. It is the look of a man who wants vengeance. He didn't deny it. They took everything from me. They deserve to pay. Perhaps, she said, her voice gentle. But vengeance is a hungry ghost. It will not bring her back, and it will not heal you. So I'm supposed to do nothing? He shot back, his hands clenched. No, she said, shaking her head. You are supposed to choose. Will you be a man consumed by the ghosts of the past, or a man who builds a future? Her words struck a chord deep inside him, a truth he didn't want to face. He had no answer for her. As the fire burned down to embers, he was left with her question hanging in the darkness. What kind of man did he want to be? He thought he already knew the answer. He was the man who had failed. But now, for the first time, he wondered if he could be someone else. And just when he thought things couldn't get more complicated, another rider appeared a week later. It was Father Miguel, the traveling priest, a kind old man who had known Garrett since he was a boy. Garrett, my son, the priest said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The town worries for you. They don't need to, Garrett said flatly. Father Miguel's smile was gentle. He saw Nan coming from the barn. Ah, and you must be Nan. I have heard whispers of a new presence at the Holiday Ranch. He looked between the two of them, his gaze wise and knowing. Garrett, I have known you a long time. I have watched you live in shadow for 3 years. But I see a light in your eyes that has been gone for a long, long time. Garrett glanced at Nan. Things are different. Change is a gift, the priest said, but it is often a confusing one. The heart can hold both grief for what was lost and joy for what has been found. To feel again is not a betrayal, my son. It is a sign of life, a sign of healing. Lily would want you to heal. Every word was like a key turning a lock deep inside him. The guilt, the fear, the feeling of betrayal he'd been wrestling with. The old priest saw it all. I don't know if I can, Garrett whispered. You can, Father Miguel said, placing a hand on his shoulder. The question is, will you allow yourself to? After the priest left, Garrett sat on the porch, watching the sunset, the sky a blaze of color. He thought about Lily. He thought about Nan. He thought about the man he was and the man he could be. That night, as he and Nan ate dinner, he found himself really seeing her. Not as a messenger from the past, not as a mystery, but as a woman. Strong, kind, and beautiful. He saw the way the candlelight softened the lines of her face, the way her eyes held a wisdom far beyond her years. And then it hit him. A realization so powerful it stole his breath. He was falling in love with her. The thought terrified him. It felt wrong, disloyal. He stood so abruptly he nearly knocked over the table. Need to check the horses, he mumbled, and fled into the cool darkness of the night. He stood by the corral, his hands gripping the top rail, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could hear her soft footsteps behind him. She came and stood beside him, not speaking, just sharing the vast, starry silence of the desert sky. I'm sorry, he said, his voice choked. You do not need to be. Don't you understand? He burst out, turning to her. It feels like I'm betraying her, just by being alive, by feeling anything at all. Nan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was a soft balm on his raw nerves. When my family died, she began, I wanted to die too. I walked into the desert, hoping the sun would take me. But I lived. And for a long time, every sunrise felt like a punishment, a betrayal of my people. She turned to face him, the moonlight catching the tears in her eyes. But then I understood. I was alive for a reason. To carry their memory. To live the life they could not. Loving again, Garrett, does not erase the love that came before. It means your heart has healed enough to grow. Something inside him shattered. A dam holding back 3 years of unshed tears, of unspoken rage and loneliness. He turned away from her, his body shaking with great, wrenching sobs. He wept for Lily. He wept for the man he had lost. He wept for the future that had been stolen. And Nan simply stood beside him, a silent, steady presence in the storm. She didn't touch him, didn't offer empty words of comfort. She just let him break. And when it was over, he felt empty, but clean, as if a poison had finally been purged. "Thank you," he whispered. "You are stronger than you know," she replied. 2 weeks later, it was time to drive the cattle to the railhead in Silverton. It was a 3-day journey, and he needed help. He asked Nan to come with him. She agreed without a second thought. The trail was long and dusty. They worked together, moving the herd across the open range. At night, they sat by a crackling campfire under a blanket of stars. The desert, once a symbol of his emptiness, now seemed full of life, full of possibility. "What did you and Lily dream of?" Nan asked one night, her voice soft. He was surprised he could talk about it without the familiar ache in his chest. "A family," he said. "A house full of noise and laughter. Something that would last." "Those are good dreams," she said. "They're just ghosts now." "Dreams do not die," she said, her gaze intense. "They change. You can still build something that lasts, Garrett. You can still have a home filled with life." He looked at her face illuminated by the fire, and for the first time, he saw it. A new dream. A different future. It wouldn't be the one he'd planned with Lily. But it could be real. They reached Silverton, a bustling town much larger than Redemption Creek. He sold the cattle for a good price, and they went to the general store for supplies. As they walked down the boardwalk, he felt the stares. A white man and an Apache woman. It drew looks, some curious, some hostile. Nan walked with her head held high, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. As they were loading their supplies, a voice cut through the street noise. "Hey, Holiday! That your squaw?" Garrett froze. 3 rough-looking ranch hands were lounging outside the saloon. The one who spoke had a pockmarked face and a cruel sneer. Garrett tried to ignore him, to just get on his horse and ride away. "I asked you a question," the man pressed, stepping into the street. "Shacking up with a savage now? Heard they're easy if you feed 'em." Before Garrett could think, Nan's voice was a low warning. "Do not. They want to fight." "I don't care what they want," Garrett snarled through clenched teeth. The pockmarked man was grinning now, enjoying himself. He took another step closer. "What's the matter, Holiday? You should have stayed in that hole you crawled into after your woman got herself shot. Some folks are just born to be losers." And then he said the words that changed everything. "Maybe you should have died with her." It wasn't just an insult. The way he said it, the look in his eye. It was personal. It was knowing. In that instant, Garrett wasn't a grieving rancher. He was a deputy again. And this man wasn't just a drunken lout. He was something else. Something familiar. Something from the nightmare that had been his life for 3 years. Before the man could say another word, Garrett's fist connected with his jaw. The man went down hard. His 2 friends lunged, and the street erupted into a chaotic brawl. Garrett was a whirlwind of motion, years of pent-up rage and grief fueling his fists. He took a punch to the ribs that stole his breath, but he drove his knee into his attacker's gut. The 3rd man grabbed him from behind, but Nan was there in a flash. She swung a heavy piece of firewood and cracked it against the man's head. He crumpled to the ground. The pockmarked man was back on his feet, pulling a knife. The blade glittered in the sun. "You're a dead man, Holiday." But before he could lunge, a deafening shotgun blast echoed through the street. The town sheriff stood on the boardwalk, a smoking shotgun in his hands. "That's enough," he barked. "Next man moves spends a month in my jail." The pockmarked man shot Garrett a look of pure hatred, then sheathed his knife and backed away with his friends. "This ain't over," he spat. "Yeah, it is," the sheriff said. He looked at Garrett and Nan. "You 2 might want to ride out. Trouble seems to follow that one." They rode out of Silverton in silence, but Garrett's mind was racing. It wasn't just a random fight. The man's words, his eyes. Garrett had a sickening feeling he'd seen that face before. Maybe in the chaos of that terrible day. A face in the crowd of outlaws. That night, camped in a rocky canyon, Garrett couldn't shake the feeling. He looked at Nan across the fire. "I'm glad you're here," he said, the words coming from a place deep inside him. "I don't know how or why you came to my ranch, but I'm glad." She met his gaze, and he saw vulnerability in her eyes that mirrored his own. "I am glad too." He reached across the small fire and took her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip was strong, and in that simple touch, he felt a flicker of hope. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't over after all. The journey back was different. The walls were down. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts, their losses, their dreams. By the time the ranch house came into view, Garrett knew one thing for certain. He was no longer the same man who had left it. Nan had changed him. But as they rode up, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A piece of paper was nailed to his front door. He ripped it down. It was a notice from the Territorial Land Office. A formal dispute. Someone had filed a claim on his property, stating that Dr. Brennan's deed was invalid, and the land was public. "What is it?" Nan asked, seeing the look on his face. "Trouble," he said grimly. "Someone's trying to steal the ranch." It didn't take him long to find out who. A trip to town confirmed his suspicions. The claim was filed by a man named Victor Crow, a wealthy, ruthless rancher who was known for swallowing up smaller properties using shady legal tactics and outright intimidation. A week later, one of Crow's men rode out to the ranch with an offer. A ridiculously low price to buy Garrett out. The message was clear. Take the money or be forced out. Garrett tore up the letter and sent the man packing. "This man Crow," Nan said that night, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "He will not give up." "No," Garrett agreed. "Men like him never do." The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, was now a place of tense vigilance. Garrett reinforced the fences, checked his rifle every day, and slept with his revolver by his bed. He felt like a deputy again, waiting for a fight he knew was coming. Then, 3 weeks after the notice, he rode into Redemption Creek to see the town clerk. The clerk, a nervous little man named Henderson, confirmed his worst fears. "Mr. Holliday," he whispered, looking around as if Crow himself might be listening. "Victor Crow has powerful friends. He twists the law. This won't be settled with paperwork. He wants your land, and he will take it. Be careful. He's not a man to be crossed." As Garrett left the clerk's office, his heart heavy, he saw him. Leaning against the saloon, watching him with cold, dead eyes. The pockmarked man from Silverton. A chill traced its way down Garrett's spine. It wasn't a coincidence. The fight in Silverton, the land claim, this man showing up here. It was all connected. Crow had hired him. Garrett galloped back to the ranch, a storm of realization brewing in his mind. He found Nan in her garden. "He's here," he said, dismounting before Copper had even stopped. "The man from Silverton. He's working for Crow." Nan's face hardened. She stood and wiped the dirt from her hands. "Then they are coming." That night, as they sat on the porch, waiting in the gathering dark, Garrett looked at her. "Nan," he said quietly, "if they come, promise me you'll run. This is just land. It's not worth your life." She turned to him, her eyes fierce in the twilight. "I will not make that promise," she said firmly. "My family died because they had nowhere to run. This is my home now. I will not abandon it, and I will not abandon you." He reached for her hand. "I don't want to lose you." "You will not," she said, her voice softening. "We will face this together." He looked at her then, this impossible, brave woman, and the last of his defenses crumbled. "I love you, Nan," he said, the words raw and true. "Not as a ghost from my past, but as you. You brought me back to life." Tears welled in her eyes. "And I love you, Garrett. My vision did not just lead me to a man who needed saving. It led me to a man who could save me too." And then she told him the rest of it, the part of the vision she had never shared. "When Lily showed me your face," she said, her voice barely a whisper, She showed me another. A face from her last moments. The man who stood over her. The man who fired the gun. Garrett's blood turned to ice. What face? Nan's eyes locked on his, dark with a terrible certainty. It was him, Garrett. The pockmarked man from Silverton. I saw him in my vision. He's the one who killed her. The world tilted on its axis. The land grab, Victor Crow, the hired thug. It was never just about the land. It was about silencing the past. Crow hadn't just hired a random outlaw. He'd hired Lily's killer. And now, that killer was coming back to finish the job. The fight for the ranch had just become a fight for justice. The attack came 2 nights later, in the moonless dark before the dawn. Garrett was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. He was at the window in an instant, his rifle in his hand. Torches. At least 8 riders, circling the house like vultures. The barn was already on fire. "Nan!" he yelled. She was already there, a rifle in her hands, her face a calm, determined mask. A voice cut through the night. "Holiday, one last chance. Sign the deed, and you and the squaw can walk away." It was Victor Crow himself. "This is my land, Crow," Garrett yelled back. "You'll have to kill me to take it." "So be it," Crow roared. Gunfire erupted. Bullets thudded into the adobe walls. Nan fired from her window, her aim steady and true, and one of the riders cried out, but there were too many. The flames from the barn rose higher, and Garrett heard the terrified screams of the horses trapped inside. "Cover me!" he yelled to Nan. "I'm getting the horses!" He burst out the back door, sprinting through a hail of bullets. He wrenched open the barn doors and plunged into the choking smoke. He led the frantic horses out one by one, slapping their rumps and sending them galloping into the safety of the hills. As he led the last horse out, a figure stepped from the smoke. The pockmarked man, a revolver in his hand, a twisted grin on his face. "Remember me, Holiday?" he snarled. "I'm the one who put your pretty little redhead in the ground. Should have been you." Rage, pure and white-hot, flooded Garrett's senses. He dove as the man fired, the bullet searing the air past his ear. Garrett rolled, brought up his own revolver, and fired twice. The second shot hit the man square in the chest. He staggered back, a look of shocked surprise on his face, and then collapsed into the dust. Justice, swift and final. But there was no time for relief. He looked toward the house and saw Crow and 2 of his men kicking in the front door. "Nan!" He raced back, bursting through the rear entrance. Crow had her. He had Nan cornered, a gun to her head. "Drop it, Holiday," Crow said, his voice cold and steady. "Or she dies just like the last one." Garrett froze. His heart hammered in his chest. He slowly, carefully, lowered his revolver and kicked it away. "You should have taken my offer," Crow sneered. "Now, you lose everything." "Let her go, Crow," Garrett pleaded, his voice breaking. "Take the ranch. Just let her live." "You love her, don't you?" Crow mused. How poetic. But this was never just about the land, Holiday. It was about cleaning up loose ends. Your Lily, and her father, they knew too much. "Knew what?" Garrett demanded. "That bank robbery 3 years ago? It wasn't just a random job," Crow said with a cruel smile. "I hired those men. I wanted them to scare Dr. Brennan, convince him to sell this land cheap. But your precious Lily got in the way. A loose end. Just like you." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The robbery. Lily's death. The land grab. It was all Crow. All of it. Crow's finger tightened on the trigger. In that split second, as his eyes narrowed with hate, Garrett saw his opening. He lunged, not at Crow, but at one of his men, tackling him and wrenching the rifle from his hands. At the same instant, Nan drove her elbow back into Crow's ribs. His shot went wild, blasting a hole in the ceiling. Garrett swung the stolen rifle like a club, knocking the second goon senseless. Nan twisted free, and Garrett fired. The bullet slammed into Crow's shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped to his knees, his face a mask of pain and shock. The rest of Crow's men, seeing their leader down, turned and fled into the night. The gunfire faded, replaced by the crackle of the burning barn. Garrett rushed to Nan, pulling her into a fierce, desperate hug. "Are you all right?" "I'm all right," she whispered, her body trembling against his. "You came back. I will always come back for you." An hour later, Samuel Tate and a half-dozen other ranchers arrived, drawn by the flames. They took Crow and his wounded men into custody, promising to see that true justice was served, no matter how powerful Crow's friends were. As the sun rose, Garrett and Nan stood together, watching the smoke curl into the morning sky. The barn was gone, but the house still stood. They were still standing. "We'll rebuild," he said, his voice hoarse. "We'll make it whole again." He turned to her, taking both of her hands in his. "Nan, you came here with a message from my past, but you became my future. You taught me how to live again, how to love again." He took a deep breath. "Will you stay? Not as my help, but as my partner, my wife." Her answer was in the tears that traced paths through the soot on her cheeks, and in the brilliant, beautiful smile that lit up her face. "Yes," she whispered. "This is my home. You are my family." He kissed her then, a promise of a new dawn, of a future built not on ghosts, but on a love that had risen from the ashes. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that Lily had sent Nan to him not just to deliver a locket, but to deliver him from the prison of his grief. She had sent him the key to unlock his own heart. The lonely man was lonely no more. He had found his redemption. If you enjoyed this story of justice and a second chance at life, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more tales from the shadows.